Hello and welcome. What you're about to see is an interview with Michael Matt. Michael is editor of the Remnant Newspaper, but before I go on, can I just say thank you for your support of the channel. If you like what you see here, please subscribe. It guarantees our future. Michael is an extraordinary man, and he's running a conference called the Catholic Identity Conference, which meets in Pittsburgh at the end of this month. Some of the most important voices within the traditional Catholic community are there. I'm delighted to say that I'm at the end of the list of people there, but I hope you'll have a look at the link to see whether or not you want to attend. It's really an immensely impressive and important event. When I met Michael, I discovered in this interview that his family experienced exactly the same tensions that the whole Catholic Church does. His father, Walter, was editor of the Remnant's predecessor called The Wanderer, and had some profound doubts about the way in which the Second Vatican Council was being implemented in the life of the Church. His uncle Alphonse was a great supporter of it, and so within the family themselves, they've had to work through the very issues we're dealing with as a whole Church. It's a great privilege to have Michael interviewed here. I'm very grateful you found the time. I hope you enjoy our conversation. I found it immensely helpful. I'm sure you will too. Michael, it's great to have you here. And for once, you're the victim and I'm on the podium. So this changes our usual relationship. I still haven't got over you calling me everyone's favorite grandpa. It's just not the way I see myself, but I'll take the compliments wherever I can get them. Look, it's great to have you here. I don't know how many people on our side of the pond know about the Remnant. I know you're very well known in the Catholic community in America. And so for our listeners over there, just enjoy a recap. But for the people who are coming to this fresh, can you tell us a bit about this enterprise? Because your dad started it. It's really quite an interesting phenomenon in the Catholic Church in terms of lay witness, lay engagement. How did this all begin?
Yeah, well, before I even start, I would say I would commend one of your countrymen. Well, he wasn't English. Michael Davies was not English. He was Welsh, of course, but he lived in London. And he was a ramrod, I would say, in the English-speaking world, maybe in the entire Catholic world, no one did more for the Restoration movement and for the defense of the traditional Latin Mass than Michael Davies. And he wrote for the Remnant for 32 years. He was our lead columnist for my father. So that gives us a connection right away, you and I, and right. Your listeners in the UK. Tremendous debt of gratitude to Michael Davies. But essentially, the Remnant was, my family goes back a long ways. My great-grandfather started the oldest English, well, actually it was German to begin with, but then it became an English Catholic newspaper, weekly newspaper called The Wanderer. It was Der Wanderer to begin with, but that was 160 years ago that he started that in answer to Pope Leo XIII's call for Catholic newspapermen to get out there and defend against the principles of the Enlightenment and Freemasonry and so forth, to defend the traditional, the social teachings of the Church, which went on from my great-grandfather, Hugo Klaproth, to my grandfather, Joseph Matt, who was a Knight of St. Gregory, for his work in defending, doing exactly as Leo had commissioned. In fact, I always get a kick out of saying that my grandfather, his newspaper, The Wanderer, was condemned. It was banned from being mailed into Nazi Germany by Goebbels, by the Third Reich, because we had a lot of German-speaking subscribers at the time. And at the same time, it was also condemned in the pages of Pravda, under the Stalin regime. So in our family, we're always very proud of that. We were just trying to do the Catholic thing. It didn't matter. You let the chips fly where they will. So then what happened very sadly, my father was the editor of that newspaper then. He was in World War II. He had a great career in the war, fighting the war in the European theater. Came home, took over the Wanderer for his father, and everything was going great until the Second Vatican Council happened, and there was a division between the two brothers then, between my uncle and my father. And I always say to people there, too, I don't denigrate my uncle for having said, well, the whole purpose and the point and purpose of our Catholic newspapers was to defend the papacy, defend the social teaching. Now things were changing, and there was a lot of confusion in the Church at that point, but we have to continue to do exactly what we're instructed to do coming from the Vatican, from the popes. My father said, well, this seems like what Pope Pius X was talking about when he mentioned the infiltration of the Church by modernists at the heart and bosom of the Church. And so it was a very difficult time for my family as these two brothers who were trying only to serve the Church came to the same impasse and ended up dividing the entire Catholic Church to a degree.
You have it as a microcosm within the family, but that's extraordinary, both illustratively and painfully.
Absolutely.
How did they manage it?
So the family has since figured things out that this was something beyond our control, and we're all trying to serve the church. So there's no ill will anymore there in the family. Thanks be to God for that. And it's an unfortunate thing that the remnant then, which started by saying, we're not changing anything. My father, he said, we just simply want to continue to defend the Catholic traditions of the Catholic faith as it always had been defended. That's all it is. We're not coming up with anything new. It's just the tradition of the church that we're defending. And so sometimes it's kind of a source of consternation for me that traditional Catholics, that especially the remnant, that were considered like these renegades and these rebels, which is the furthest thing from the truth. What we're trying to do is simply hold on to the faith and hand down the faith as it was handed to us from our fathers to our sons. So it's really been a beautiful thing to see how, in a sense, that dogged determination to defend tradition, especially under the reign of Pope Benedict XVI, became much less controversial because people could see there was a crisis in the church. I'm sure you don't want to get into the tall grass of that crisis. I'm sure your listeners already know what that is. But my only point is the remnant's position has been completely exonerated by this idea that, yes, there are problems in the church. We will never leave the church. We will never flagrantly just condemn the popes or anything else. But we talk about the diabolical disorientation that affects all of us, and it also affects the leadership of the Catholic Church to a degree, obviously. So I think the remnant's role has always been more or less a constant statement of the obvious. We don't invent anything new. Our opinion doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all what I think or the judgments that I make. As long as we stand on tradition and on the infallible teachings of the church, we believe that that's a very important stand to make right now, especially when you see the chaos not only in the church but in the world that's setting in. It's just very important to understand we're not inventing anything new. We're trying our very best, prayerfully, and in light of what the providence asks of us, demands of us, to simply stay Catholic as we always were. And also to understand that diabolical disorientation affects a lot of people. So how we say things, how we present this defensive tradition has to be done in such a way where it's not for our own aggrandizement, but it's also has to take into account the confusion. You have to take into account the scandal. A lot of people don't understand how is it possible to take issue with a reigning pontiff, for example. Well, you have to do that with respect. You have to do that in a way that, again, leads with tradition. Always cognizant, however, that you can't just say whatever you want. That it's very important to try to lead people, to prevent scandal, to keep hope alive. Keeping hope alive is essential. And I think in the day and age of the internet, where prudence and wisdom and all these virtues are gone, and all you do on the internet is you say everything that's on your mind as fast as you can type it out because that's going to get you clicks and likes, a very dangerous and a very un-Catholic attitude. We have to exercise and practice those virtues of prudence and patience and wisdom, do the very best while admitting that there's a crisis that has to be addressed. So that's essentially what we are. We're just a Catholic newspaper that never changed anything and we're never going to leave the church, but also is aware of the crisis and trying to help people navigate these really uncharted waters of crisis and revolution.
So let me ask you a question as someone who's quite new to the game in some respects. I'm not new to Catholic theology. I've been reading it and thinking about becoming a Catholic for 40 years. But the realpolitik that we've been struggling with, I'm a bit new to that. So first of all, a disclaimer: when you kindly invited me to speak at the Catholic Identity Conference last year, we'll talk more about the one that's coming this year. And I must say, when I arrived, I immediately looked around and thought, these are my people. I like these people. I belong here. This is a tremendous group of Catholics, and everything that was done liturgically, sociologically, spiritually, communally, I thought, well, this is just great. I couldn't do better than this. So I need to tell our listeners that I'm essentially committed to the whole vision that you're overseeing, and so I'm whether that makes me objective or not doesn't matter, but that's absolutely where I'm coming from. But let me ask you a question, please, because I think I need some help from it, and I think maybe there's some other people do too. A lot of people are writing to me really every day who want to become Catholic, and they've got a number of difficulties. most of them flow from the propagandization of the Protestant critique, and they can be dealt with by saying, no, that's not true, no, that's not true, no, that's not true. But one of the things that I wasn't quite prepared for was that in the same way that in the university circles where I came from, you would be given a kind of test case. Here would be something you had to agree with or disagree with in order to belong. The Second Vatican Council appears to have become that, or at least used in that way by, well, let's say the the in group, the powerful group, the establishment, and they basically say, if you're willing to accept the authority of the Second Vatican Council in all its fullness, with a recognition that there may be some element of, they won't say discontinuity, but some some rough gear change. Then you're a good modern Catholic, and then, but the traditionalists say, but actually this is a complicated question. There hasn't been enough time. There really is a gear change. I think, from my own point of view, in a simplistic way, my immediate reaction is that the fathers of the Second Vatican Council underestimated the forces of secularism, and if they'd known what we're seeing today, they might have been less accommodating at the time. But that's a private view. Is it the case that the kind of the mainstream Catholic establishment use the Second Vatican Council as almost a filtration process of whether you're a good Catholic or not? Because I keep on being asked what I think of the Pastoral Council, and
Yeah.
I certainly think I'm being tested. What Tell me what it looks like from the inside in terms of the political landscape I'm entering into.
You're quite right. It's a multi-layered thing. It's not an easy black and white question or to ask or an answer to provide. I always say to people who, as you say, sort of hold it up as the ultimate test, if you're truly a Catholic, I always say, could you please just tell me, and I'd say this in all charity, what is it about Vatican II that I must accept in peril of my soul as a practicing Catholic? For example, the points of the creed: I believe in God, the Father Almighty, Creator of God. I believe in the Church. I believe in, what is the dogma of the Second Vatican Council that I must accept in peril of my soul? And the reality, of course, is that there isn't one. So then I say, so what exactly are we talking about? What am I being asked to accept? The legitimacy of the council? No traditionalist worth his salt has ever questioned that. Was it a validly convened council? Archbishop Lefebvre himself was a council father. Of course, it was a validly convened council. But there was an effort, once again, the Rhine flows into the Tiber. There was an effort, once again, to use that council to bring about revolution. So what we're talking about, and I think we have to be so careful of when people put that question to us, are you talking about the 16 documents? And if you want to talk about the problematic, what Michael Davies called time bombs in those documents, I'm all for it. But I still, separate from that, I want to know, are you talking about the 16 documents of Vatican II, or are you talking about a certain watershed moment, a change in the church, a sea change, a spirit of Vatican II? Because the spirit of Vatican II is, I think, what most people are talking about.
Right.
They haven't even read the 16 documents.
Right.
Michael Davies used to make that point, and I thought it was a brilliant point. He says, if you want to talk about Sacrosanctum Concilium, for example, where it says no change to the liturgy can be made unless it's for the good of the church. And so Michael used to say, why was it for the good of the church to stop taking a knee at the Et Incarnatus Est? Why was it for the good? And then he would make the point, the ones who are violating the council, Sacrosanctum Concilium anyway, are the modernists, not the traditionalists. The traditionalists have made none of these changes. So I think it's really important to put people's feet to the fire. Don't just get away with that easy question, like a trick question. Do you accept Vatican II? For one thing, another thing that's very important is to say, which council are you referring to? Because Pope Benedict XVI in 2013, February 14, speaking to the Curia, speaking to one of his last public speeches to the Curia, he said there are two councils. He said there's a council of the media, which was not what we intended, and there was the council that the council fathers intended. And then he said the council that we tried to do, the council fathers intended, that one, he said, has failed to materialize. And he says the only council that the world knows is the one that trivialized the Roman Rite, is responsible for the closing of seminaries, for the closing of monasteries, and for chaos in the church. Now, this is the Pope saying there were two councils. The media council is fraudulent, but it's the only one anybody knows. That's not even the true council. So I only
And
bring that up by.
that's synonymous with the spirit of Vatican II.
It's exactly right.
Right. Okay.
Exactly right.
Well, I mean, then that's very helpful. So, I mean, obviously, this isn't the first time I've heard the analysis. You've phrased it beautifully, and I think for people who are coming to it for the first time, that's that's a really excellent exposition of it. Well, that's extremely helpful. Of course, one of the ways in which this crystallizes is the way in which the Novus Ordo emerged in a fashion that I think everyone agrees was historically unexpected. What Bernini produced, and there are exciting tales about him saying one thing to the Pope in the corridor and another thing to the committee and never quite marrying up. But like it or not, we've got the Novus Ordo. And certainly one of the things that stopped me becoming a Catholic for a while was the extent to which the Novus Ordo Mass seemed awfully like the Anglican Eucharist that I was used to. And I would wonder, well, what is the point? Clearly Catholicism is just a form of Italianate Anglicanism. Why would I need to change this liturgy for the other? You'd have to be really picky to be able to tell the difference.
Right.
So now, having become a Catholic and discovering that actually, as I suspected, the theological poetry and metaphysics of the Mass is a different cosmos from the memorial service. This then becomes obscured by the Novus Ordo. And so that's given me some sense into why some traditionalists, perhaps we shouldn't even call them that, some rooted faithful Catholics, find the Novus Ordo so difficult, because it looks like it's the incarnation of that other Vatican Council into the liturgy. And so perhaps we do have two liturgies, one that says, but look, this is unchanging Catholicism, and then one that says, well, the people who carried the day in the spirit of Vatican II managed to get their hands on the liturgy. They were in the driving seat, and therefore it's not entirely it's Catholic, but it's not high octane Catholic. How would you describe it?
No, but exactly right. And we could use the same sort of metric there. You could say to people, well, tell me, where in Sacrosanctum Concilium does it call for the abandonment of Latin? Where does it call for the nixing of Gregorian chant? Where did Pope Paul VI, or even Bugnini, where did they call for altar girls? Communion in the hand, the abolishment of ad orientem, all of these things that we see, women lectors, all of what most people associate with the Novus Ordo, the new Mass today. Where is the authoritative promulgation of any of that? And there's where you then can say, okay, well, I don't have to hate anybody. I can at least say, man, this has been very convoluted and very confusing as to how this all happened. It lacks many, I would say 90% of these abuses lacked any initial authority, certainly coming out of the council, certainly coming out of Sacrosanctum Concilium. There was no call for this. So whose idea was it then? How did these things happen? And that's where I think you then can have a more open conversation with people of goodwill. No, we're not here to try to, condemn Pope Paul VI or say he wasn't a pope. We're now sedevacantist, so we're just going to simply, none of this is legitimate. It's not that at all. We're trying to figure out what happened, and then we can have honest discussions once you realize it does lack some authoritative promulgation. Most of the things that you think is the Novus Ordo Mass, that came later, it sort of evolved. Once you realize that, then I think you can have pretty coherent and charitable and constructive discussions with people, arguing, has this been for the good of the church?
Now,
and in what sense?
From a selfish point of view, I'd like to ask you a rookie question.
Yeah.
So the rookie in me says, well, okay, so we had a Second Vatican Council. Clearly, it appeared at a time of maximum social hiatus in the middle of one of the most confused and disorientated centuries that we've had, culturally, philosophically, and so on. Well, that was not a good time to have a council. There should be a third council, if you like, on a Hegelian principle. We have thesis and antithesis, and let's sort it out. And then a lot of people say to me, "You're an idiot. You don't realize how difficult councils are. You cannot be serious calling for a third council." And I say, "Well, I'm a rookie. I'm just looking at this organizationally. Clearly, we have the First Vatican Council. We have the second one. Everyone agrees the second one's leaving us in some form of suspended animation that's unresolved. So why not a third one? It's not practical." Here's the rookie question: is it, instead of a whole third council, do we need a third liturgy? In other words, can can we find our way back to our Catholic roots liturgically through by saying the novice order doesn't cut it, or even I know it doesn't cut it. um,
Yeah.
and without calling a third council, what we need is a form of liturgical consolidation that's entirely consistent with the Mass of the Ages, whilst taking into consideration, I don't know. It's beyond my pay grade to say what should be taken into consideration in terms of the modernist legacy. But is that a way, in terms of you strategically? If the Pope called you in tomorrow and said, "Michael, I love your work. Look, I'm at an impasse. I need a bit of advice." How would you recommend bringing peace and theological coherence to a church divided by the culture wars?
Yeah, well, see, this is something that's been discussed for a long, long time in the traditional movement and in the sort of the center tradition leaning movement. People like Father Joseph Fessio, Father Brian Harrison over the years, Cardinal Ratzinger himself talking about the reform of the reform. Now, personally, as a traditionalist, I just love the traditional Latin Mass, and I've seen it work with young people. I go to the Sharp pilgrimage every year. I've seen that there's no difficulty with people, once they understand the point of liturgy, in embracing the historic, traditional, beautiful Mass of our patrimony. But I would say, why is it? So you say, do we need to have a third council? Do you have a third liturgy, another liturgy? Why is that being prevented by the Vatican? And it absolutely is. So the question is, what is the spirit then of liturgical reform if, when a reigning pontiff, namely Benedict XVI, came out in a document that was controversial for traditional Catholics, Summorum Pontificum, because it seemed to equalize the two rights, and it seemed to say they'll be mutually beneficial. And your hardcore traditionalists to say, wait a minute, no way, we want nothing to do. We want the traditional Latin Mass. That's what we're fighting for. So I would say Pope Benedict put all of that on the table, the mutual enrichment thing. Whether I agree with that or think it's feasible or not, I appreciate what he tried to do. So the question would be, why did the Vatican stop that? Why did the Vatican come out with Traditionis Custodes and cancel Benedict's effort to resolve the liturgical problem in the church? And to me, that's the more interesting question. How you and I might want to see a liturgy come about that would be more beneficial for our community. That's all kind of subjective and on our opinion, based on my opinion of liturgy and what I'm being fulfilled with and what I'm not being fulfilled with. To me, the much greater and more serious question is, why has the Vatican stopped the very thing you just brought up? Why did the Vatican put the kibosh on that? And that speaks to me, I'm sorry, to motive, at least with the last pontificate. It speaks to a motive in the Vatican that wanted nothing to do with that, with a reform of the reform. And the question is, why not?
Absolutely. And I entirely put my hand up to your kindly expressed charge that the very motivation to ask for a liturgy that suits me is sub-Catholic. It's absolutely in line with one's Protestant instincts, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm very open to being told, no, the Catholic Church has a Mass. It's the
Mm-hmm.
Latin Mass.
Yeah.
If you feel that's inadequate somehow, try becoming a bit more Catholic. I'm absolutely fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose I was talking about ways in which the cultural divide might be healed if one can't achieve unity by saying to all the 1.4 billion Catholics, try being a bit more Catholic, which I totally
Mm-hmm.
agree. The conference that you're I probably, but let's just finish with Francis and Benedict. I mean, in one sense, it's quite clear that Pope Francis overstepped the mark. I was talking to one of our politicians for a podcast here yesterday, a guy called Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, who's a very famous public Catholic here, and I said I wanted to talk about Francis, but was anxious about whether he'd feel it could be done respectfully. And he said, no, we're perfectly entitled to evaluate pontificates in a historical context, and that Francis is now history. Let's
Mm-hmm.
evaluate it. And then
Mm-hmm.
it was really pretty brutal in terms of the ambiguity and the revenge. So Pope Francis, for whatever reasons, clearly overstepped the mark horrifically by trying to ban the Latin Mass. We now know through Diane Montagna he did it illegitimately, by mispresenting the evidence. The way he did it was hateful. It was vengeful. There
Yeah.
isn't any other word. I mean, that's we better tell it like it is, or we can't have a proper conversation. Does that not help us though? I mean, now, if you like, it's almost as if the full momentum or the full trajectory of the spirit of Vatican II comes to fruition in this personal dislike of this particular pontiff. God bless him, God help him. But now we know, isn't that a help to us? We can say, look, there was something rotten about the motivation. It came, it broke the surface in this septicemia. So we're entitled to be suspicious of those forces in the Vatican that come to their full representation in France.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I always say that there was no greater recruiter for the traditional Latin Mass movement than Francis. He was better than Archbishop Lefebvre,
Right.
and all, because people finally could see there was something that really plagued the effort, the Catholic Restoration movement's effort. It was called papalatry. And it was basically sort of a Protestant attitude towards the papacy. Whatever the Pope said is God saying it. And I'm not talking about within the confines of infallibility, which is fairly narrowly defined,
Yeah,
the
but
conditions
very
for
narrowly.
infallibility.
Yep.
So there was this papalatry thing. You couldn't question anything that was going on. And as you say, Pope Francis, he in a way, he was not the ramrod. He didn't start any of this, but he took it. He was probably one of the most honest modernists that the church has seen in modern times, because he just cut it all away. He stopped trying to fool anybody, and he said exactly what the intention truly had been. Basically, sort of like we had here in the States. President Obama said, "I'm going to take the United States, I'm going to take America, change it fundamentally so it can never be changed back again." I'm sorry, but that's essentially what Francis said about the Catholic Church. We're going to change
Yep.
it so it can never be changed back again. So I think you're quite right. People, many good people, who were just hanging in there, like my uncle had been with respect to the first revolution, the first split at the time of the council. Lots of people were hanging in there, and then they saw the Francis approach, and they said, "Well, this is not. Look at the fruits. This is not good." For example, most traditional Catholics, Gavin, the vast majority of traditional Catholics today are in diocesan churches. They're homeschool or small Catholic school families. They're the folks that kind of all they wanted to do was just raise their kids. And they really responded favorably to the Latin Mass, and they were excited about it, and they felt that it really fed their souls. These people also have not read the 16 documents of Vatican II. They don't know anything about Vatican II. They're not counter-revolutionaries. They're just simple people trying to raise their children in a very dangerous and very Christophobic world. And so when the Pope, in the public eye, when he comes out and he shuts all those people down at the level of the diocese, and we're talking diocesan priests, not
Yep.
SSPX priests,
Yep.
not Fraternity of St. Peter priests, he shuts down diocesan priests who all along had been cooperating with the indult, cooperating with the church, with the Vatican, with the wishes of the Pope. And he takes them out, and he takes all those young families, and he basically crushed them, which, as I say, became a recruiting tool. Lots of people, EWTN types, we talk about like famous people, football players like Harrison Butker, Candace Owens types, even Tucker Carlson, even non-Catholics, looking at this going, what in the world is going on? So I quite agree with you. All of a sudden, the mask was ripped off the spirit of Vatican II. Not even talking about the council. The spirit of Vatican II, in my opinion, has become diabolical in that it's an assault on the traditions of the church. And so, yeah, that's for whatever reason. Maybe that's in God's providence. Maybe what happened, God, like you say, I pray for the repose of Pope Francis. I don't hate Pope Francis, diabolical disorientation, but made it all the way to the top of the church. But in God's providence, there was a massive awakening throughout the world, especially throughout the Catholic world, thanks to that papal approach, which was a disaster for him.
Indeed. I mean, I've been grumbling to God and saying to him, okay, the time of my conversion was in your hands. I would very much like to have become a Catholic under John Paul II. And if I couldn't do that, I loved Benedict XVI. But this is hard,
Mm-hmm.
particularly because the last thing somebody wants to do when they become a Catholic is find themselves trying to pope-splain in the circumstances that Francis required. So,
Right.
and then
You know, if I can interrupt you for just for a second, I want to clarify something I just said, which might be confusing to your viewers. When I say that there had been this papalatry thing, which was a Protestant, I don't mean the Protestant attitude towards the papacy. I mean
no,
the
no,
Protestant mischaracterization, the Protestant characterization of what Catholics believe. We don't believe this. But it all of a sudden became sort of like that. You could not question anything he said. He wasn't the vicar of Christ anymore. He was Christ, which is, as I say, a Protestant caricature of what we believe. So yeah, it was really something.
and I understood that, but thank you for clarifying it because just
Mm-hmm.
in case there's any ambiguity. So, but I have But only near the end, as his death appeared, did I find the courage to say, actually, Lord, I think what you're doing is precisely what you, Michael, have described. I think
Mm,
you're bringing the whole project to the surface so we can see it for
mhm,
what it is. And
mhm,
and in a sense, the watching world, and particularly the watching Catholic world with a modernist gloss, now can see very clearly what the implications of the two trajectories are, and this one isn't very
absolutely.
good. So,
Mm,
in a sense, it provides a motivation, as you say, to reconsider, recalibrate what Catholicism is, particularly in these contested culture wars that are going ever more intense. Which
mhm,
takes us to Pope Leo. We'll come to the Catholic Identity Conference in a moment, but
sure.
first of all, let's go to Pope Leo. I'm so in the last 12 weeks, of course, everyone has been really on edge because so much hangs on it. I remember when I was commenting on his election, I couldn't enter into the kind of conviviality of communal commentary because frankly I was so terrified. I thought, Lord,
Mhm,
I really don't think I could survive a Francis II. I think it would be, I fear it would be beyond me. There's
mhm,
nothing beyond you, but I was very deeply apprehensive. And then I knew nothing about Prevost, and as time went by, I began to like his body language and like his verbal language, and I couldn't see anything wrong with his roots, and but nonetheless still cloaked in a kind of diplomatic, I don't know, anonymity. He said almost nothing. Now, in this period, I think, like me, a lot of faithful Catholics are really very anxious because the
mhm.
punishment beatings that the church took under Francis were very severe, as you've described. And so people are twitchy. How twitchy should they be? What's your reading of what's going on? As far as I'm concerned, Father Jimmy Martins is just another leftist activist using all the tricks of the trade, photo ops, putting implied words into his mouth. In a sense, the Pope has said almost nothing in terms
Mhm,
of the things we've been talking about,
mhm,
and those actions have been benign. He's worn the right clothes. He's showed himself completely at ease with Latin liturgy. He's a good singer. He likes Gregorian chant.
mhm.
And I sense an intellectual diplomat or some finesse behind what he's doing. I'm hopeful. What do you feel?
It's a really you have to take in so many considerations into account. The past 12 years that has left a lot of people understandably jaded
Yeah,
and frustrated and fed up. And so you almost can't say anything without the polarized two sides just jumping on top of you. But it's really important, I think, that we try to understand. You're asking the wrong person because I'm so used to this. I've grown up. You're not expecting a whole lot from what's happening. And you know why? Because my church is the one true Catholic, the one true church founded by Jesus Christ, outside of which there's no salvation. I firmly believe that. So what that means is that the ongoing confusion, disorientation, that's the attacks that are going on, even from within the Catholic Church, only strengthen my faith. Only
right.
strengthen my faith. And even so, all these years after the big revolution, Pius X, way back in 1907, is warning the world about the infiltration. They're still trying to get the Catholic Church. Why?
Yeah,
Because the Catholic Church matters more than anything else.
sure.
So I'm not scandalized by this. I sort of anticipate this, and we do our best operating behind enemy lines to do the best that we can do. So I quite agree with you. Somebody like Jimmy Martin, it is simply not interesting for me at all to let that guy control the narrative, to
Right.
let him go out there. But I'll say this about Jimmy Martin: he's a strategist, a smart guy.
Yeah,
He's a Jesuit. He knows what he's
absolutely.
doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And I wish we had more people on our side who were saying, wait a
Me
minute, let's go and do something similar to try to control the outcome of all of this, because we don't know what Leo is going to ultimately do. People are using this LGBT thing in the Vatican. Well, we were there. I had reporters that went in with the LGBT people, took pictures. We know
Mm.
exactly what that was. Still, even so, even though the Pope is responsible for what happens in his basilica, we still can't simply rule out the spirit of Francis behind these things. Were all planned before. That's not the Pope's plan. That's not to say, well, he's fine. He didn't like it at all. All I'm saying is I don't know for sure. As you say, he hasn't said much. So until we know for sure, I think it's much more important to try to sort of be the Jimmy Martin of the traditional Catholic wing of the church and do everything you possibly can to remind
Yeah.
Pope Leo of Father Prevost. That's what we have to do, because Father Prevost said some really good things about things like homosexuality, abortion, euthanasia. Is he still in there? And I'm willing to do whatever I possibly can to fight to find out if he's still in there for two reasons. One, because I want to shake Leo and say, Holiness, don't do this. Don't leave us. Don't abandon us. But also because I want the court of public opinion to see traditionalists, me, the remnant, we were in no hurry to condemn the new pope, that we want to do everything we can to work and to hope that and pray that he cooperates with the grace of office. There's every reason in the world right now. Is optimistic, maybe is the wrong word, but to be realistic and to try everything we possibly can and to anticipate the diabolical spirit that's dominating the Vatican right now, and to see if maybe Leo, if he sees that he has the support of the Cardinal Burkes, of the Cardinal Mullers, of the Cardinal Sarahs, of the Bishop Schneiders, all of these hierarchs who are putting pressure on him. As we said, it's not a very nice expression, but it's not over till the fat lady sings. We just don't know yet. And so hang in there and continue to fight. And don't just fall for the internet temptation to sound off and condemn. And, that gets you clicks, but it also leaves you in a cul-de-sac. It's a dead end. So I don't see any point in doing that. And we're going to continue to do what we've always done and try to influence the outcome in whatever way we can.
I'm a failed opera singer. I'm very happy to go with your phrase. It's not open till the fat lady sings. But meanwhile, so let's go to the virtuous side of Jimmy Martin, the sensible, skillful, faithful, intelligent Catholic, and that seems to me to be what you're producing in the Catholic Identity Conference. I came for the first time last year. I loved it. I was very impressed with just the ordinary people, let alone the speakers. Some of the speakers were amazing, particularly that wonderful, tall, thin Portuguese priest who tramps around Africa celebrating the Mass and gives the lie to the modernist nonsense that the average African villager can't make head or tail of the Latin Mass, because that's not what happens.
Not at all.
I'd like to ask you a little bit about what led to the formation of it. What's the history of the conference? What's on the menu next year, this coming year, because it's happening in 2 or 3 weeks' time, and maybe there are people listening to us who might want to sign up once they know what's on the menu.
One of the reasons to pull off what we just talked about, one of the reasons that I think it's so important to present an intelligent traditional Catholic restoration movement that appreciates the virtue of patience and prudence, and appreciates the need for reconnaissance, to know what you're talking about, to understand what's happening. I think it's really important that bishops see that, because there are, you understand, maybe because you're a convert, I'm sure you understand it. I don't know if your viewership does or not. Collegiality has been the problem. The chains of collegiality, this old boys club in the hierarchy that agreed where nobody's going to break ranks. We're all going to do this together, one for all for one, and that's it. And that plagued the church for a long time. Even good bishops, good cardinals were afraid to break ranks. Okay, things got so unfortunate, so bad under the last pontificate that many, many broke ranks. And I'm telling you, Gavin, this is no exaggeration. I've walked up the Borgo Pio practically every time I go to Rome now. It's unusual for a bishop to not walk up to me. I don't introduce myself. I don't even necessarily recognize them. They say, "You're Michael Matt. Keep up the good work." And I'm not exaggerating. That happens a lot.
But that's wonderful, dear. I mean, that's fantastic to hear. No surprise, too.
So that's going on. A number of us have concluded for a long time we need to do a couple of things. We need to, I've been stressing this, unite the clans. So the Catholic Identity Conference began with getting the people together, people who may not agree with everything. You and I probably don't agree on, I'm sure we don't agree on everything, right? But we're on this pilgrimage of life together. We're trying to figure it out. The tough issues we're going to have a discussion. And the Catholic Identity Conference is a place where you can do that. It's not mutually assured destruction. We bring people in. So we brought the lay people in who kind of get over themselves and say, yeah, okay, I don't go to the fraternity, but I can see why I go to the society, but all right, let's have a chat. That worked out beautifully. We upgraded to bringing priests together. We're the first conference ever that I'm aware of that was able to get at the same roster a priest from the Society of St. Pius X, the Fraternity of St. Peter, the Institute of Christ the King, and several diocesan and the Bon Pasteur priests at the same conference. That was a success. People felt like that was from God because we're all trying to figure out the answers here. It's not false compromise. So then we thought, well, the next thing to do is go for the hierarchy. we were blessed by God, as everyone in the traditional movement has been blessed by God, to meet His Holiness Bishop Athanasius Schneider, who really, especially for me, because I knew Archbishop Lefebvre as a child and I understood the importance of the hierarchy. You can't do this without the hierarchy. You can hold on at the grassroots level, you can hold on to the old faith, but ultimately the restoration is going to come through God's hierarchical system that our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ established. It's got to come that way. And as good, faithful Catholics who will never leave the church, we're always looking to the hierarchy. Bishop Schneider has led the charge in that. Don't give up on us. There are good people. A couple of years ago at the CIC, I had Cardinal Gerhard Muller. I interviewed him at the CIC. So these are not insignificant because the Catholic Identity Conference has not tempered anything. We're not refusing to say anything. We will talk about everything. And yet these bishops and cardinals are willing to come in to the scattered sheep, nearly us, kind of come together and be that struck shepherd who's no longer struck, who's willing to talk tradition, and who's willing to say, let's see if we can't put an effective Catholic restoration movement together. That's what's happened. And this year it's just exploded. I can't even believe this has happened, but we have 5 bishops this year who are going to be speaking together in person at the Catholic Identity Conference. And this is the message that I want the whole world to see about traditional Catholics, that we are not renegades. We're not leaving the church. Every time Bishop Snyder, for example, or Cardinal, when they are willing to come and speak to us, it should be a leaven. It should be a balm for the soul. That God has not given up on His church. It's going to be a long time. It's a long haul. There's a war going on, but you can still see that He's with His church and He's with His hierarchy. And I think this year at the Catholic Identity Conference, thank God that your conversion, you being there, is another example of who would have thought. I'm sure if somebody had said to you a few years ago, do you think you let somebody be not only Catholic, but speaking at a Catholic conference in Pittsburgh, you would have said absolutely not. So we see providence in all of this. And I'm really excited about this coming. It's going to be October 3rd, 4th, and 5th in Pittsburgh, where we're going to put this all together again and say, no, we're not going anywhere. We're not leaving the church. Absolutely not.
That's very encouraging. On a personal note, a few years ago, I was giving a talk in the Netherlands, and I just, you know when you meet somebody of real caliber, and in the audience was this bishop called Rob Mutsarts. He was an auxiliary bishop, and the Catholic bishops in Holland are pretty far gone down the down the modernist road, and he was causing a certain amount of, I don't know what one would call it really, holy friction, I think might be a way of saying, look, this is not Catholic, this is not Episcopal, it's not Catholic, it's and living with the fallout of that whilst being obedient as a Catholic bishop, which must have been incredibly difficult. I thought he was one of the most impressive people I've met in the last 20 years. And when I discovered that you'd found him and he's going to be speaking in Pittsburgh in 2 or 3 weeks' time, I just went, I'm so glad. I think he, to my money, for my judgment, he's one of the most impressive Episcopal voices that I've really ever come across. And to have him there, plus Bishop Schneider, who's just can't help be a star. He just is. He's got a charism. The Lord, I guess I'm sure he's paid for it, but he's got it. And so him and Mutsarts. Who are you with? I know it's a bit invidious to ask you who you're looking forward to presenting as MC, but who else would you like to commend to people who are listening in case they want to come in person?
Well, again, we're really trying to cast a wide net. We have Bishop Elegante, he's done so much great work, especially on the question of synodality. He's just been so outspoken. He's so done it. And as you say, I'm so glad to hear this about Mutsarts because I haven't met him yet. So I'm really glad to hear that this is how you reacted to him. Of course, Bishop Spinoza, of course, Bishop Strickland will be there, another one who's suffered a great deal for his beliefs. And again, Bishop Strickland, he's not a diehard Latin Mass guy who's always been in the Latin Mass trenches. Not at all.
He's just a good bishop.
He's just a good bishop who's coming more and more in the direction of tradition. And we're going to have a beautiful, address from him, a conversation with him. But then also, you just mentioned Africa. I just came back from Africa where I did a sort of Unite the Clans tour down there, give some speeches down in Nairobi and Kenya and Uganda, finding all these beautiful traditional Catholic enclaves in Africa. And one of the most important, I think, is the one in Singida. And so we have actually African missionary priests coming to the CIC for the first time. We had an African bishop 2 years ago. Now we have the priests and missionary priests who are coming in. But also, just as an aside that I'm excited about, there's a woman called Liz Wheeler, who's a young influencer on the internet, on YouTube. And she's been coming in the direction of tradition for a long time. She appeals to the younger people. Is she an absolute remnant Latin Mass Michael Madcap? No, she's just someone who's interested in the truth. She sees this as a spiritual war. She says the prayer to St. Michael every day before her show. So it's not like everybody has to be in lockstep, perfect agreement at the CIC. We want to get everybody together and have a very constructive discussion of the truth, trying to guide as much as we possibly can the attendees. There'll be probably 600-700 people there, and then live streamers over and above that, in the direction of genuinely pursuing truth in the spirit of charity, while being cognizant of the diabolical disorientation that Sister Lucia spoke about from Fatima fame, that everyone's affected by that diabolical disorientation, including us. So making these demands that everyone has to be in lockstep with my opinion is completely counterproductive. And I really, I'm grateful for you being there, for people being willing to come out with this big, interesting experiment. Can we get over ourselves enough to find the truth as much as possible? Can we get out of our own way and learn to serve God as best as we possibly can, and at the same time defend our suffering church, not by agreeing to abandon her when she's being scourged, but by agreeing collectively together to stay all the way to the foot of the cross. We're not ever going to leave the church, and we need each other. There's a human consolation in having each other on that pilgrimage.
Michael, Matt, that sounds like a fantastic note to end on. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time. It's been really wonderful to talk to you like this. And I look forward immensely to meeting you again in person in Pittsburgh in 3 weeks' time. And in the show notes, I'll leave some links so if people want to become themselves, they know how to do it. Michael,
Gavin,
thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you so much. God bless you. Thanks for having me. And I really look forward once again to welcoming you to Pittsburgh in a couple of weeks. God bless you.
Michael, thank you.